Okay.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andre. Good morning to everybody. It was a while since I was teaching the last time, so it's a pleasure for me to sit in front of such young public again. This video was incorporated in my presentation, however, it was a little bit more advanced version, so it didn't work on this computer. But nowadays you can find a lot of videos on YouTube or on the TED platform about climate change. Just this one shows very well how for the last 131 years the climate changed on the Earth. And it's only in 26 seconds, so you will see how drastically the temperature will increase over the globe. Okay, so I'll go to my presentation. I don't want to scare you to death, but this total increase of the temperature is just 0.6 degrees Celsius. And the consequences, you can see them every day. When I started to deal with climate change, there was really somebody knowing what it is meaning climate change. Nowadays, every day on the news or in the newspapers or in the internet, you can see different information coming from different areas of the world about extreme weather events. Unfortunately, they are so often nowadays. Just a week ago, there were severe storms in the United States. I'm sure you have seen those. There were extreme floodings in UK, and all of you witnessed the heat wave here in Central Europe. Coming from Bratislava, I just arrived from Armenia. I've learned that several people died in Slovakia for the last 2 days because of the heat waves, and there were 200 calls for the emergency to help people. So obviously the climate change is happening. So the other thing is that it is affecting all areas of our life. Here on this picture you can see all the sectors of the economy: agriculture, forest, water, ecosystem, health, trade, energy. Everything is affected by climate change, but as well the nature. You can see everywhere in the nature different signals that climate change is affecting. Just some months ago, it was announced that entire nation of Kiribati will be relocated due to the rise of sea levels. And this is the first nation in the world to be relocated in another place. There are estimations that by 2040 there will be 150 immigrants due to climate change. So most probably the movie The Day After Tomorrow is not a science fiction. So this is what we are facing, a world which is changing due to climate change. So what we can do, the scientists are telling us that in order to keep the so-called safe threshold of increase of the global temperature by 2 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial era, the concentration of CO2 should stabilize at 450 ppm, which is parts per meters in the atmosphere. And on the pink scheme, this is the gray horizontal line, which you are seeing, which means that the whole world should decrease by 50% the emission by 2050. If you look, the red lines going up on the pink scheme, these are the scenarios. So you see, in all the scenarios, the world is a bit above the threshold. So this is not good. there is another thing. If you look again, there is one lighter column in the middle. And this is the time frame within which the big change should happen. And this window of opportunities is between 100 and 150 months. So it's a very narrow windows of opportunities to change our lifestyles, to change the way we are producing, the way we are living in order to survive. But the climate change is not the only one which is putting a lot of pressure on the planet. It is the world population. You know that October last year it was announced that the population reached 7 billion, and it is expecting by 2050 to raise to 9 billion. There is an internet program in which everybody could insert the date of birth and see how many inhabitants on the earth were at that minute he or she was born. I did that for myself. It was 2.6 billion, and I'm 50. So in 50 years, the population grew from 2.6 billion to 7 billion. So imagine the pressure on all the resources, on the natural resources, on energy, on materials, on food, on water needed for all this. So we are facing a need to change all this paradigm and all the economy, the governments, the private sector, they have to take the lead and to make this change as soon as possible, because I told you the window of opportunities is very narrow. The good news is that the famous Sir Nicholas Stern, he did a report, so-called Stern Review, saying that it is cheaper to take actions now, and it is doable. However, the climate change is undermining the conditions necessary for economic growth in both in developed and developing countries. So as I said, there is a lot of information on internet nowadays. You can see presentations of great thinkers, of great people of nowadays. So this is what I took from a presentation of Bill Gates, how we have to innovate to zero. As I said, very soon the whole globe should go to zero CO2 emissions, which is really a big revolution. So he provided an equation. So the CO2 emissions, the global emissions of CO2, they are equal if you multiply the number of the people, which, as I said, is growing, the services per person, which are growing as well. All of you are having more and more services with every day. And I've seen recently a presentation saying that most probably all of us, we had a better breakfast than the French king 150 years ago. So obviously we consume much more nowadays. We have E here is energy per service, which is going down at the moment, which is the only one going down. And we have CO2 per unit energy. So how this equation will be equal to zero? People cannot disappear, obviously. The services are going up. So the only one which could be zero is the CO2 per unit energy. So we need such a technological breakthrough, which at the moment such technology does not exist, to bring us in year 2100 to zero emissions. At least from the industry, because there are emissions coming from other sectors as well. So what the whole world is doing, what the international community is doing, I'm sure you have heard of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, you have heard of the Kyoto Protocol, you have heard that currently the international community is trying to negotiate a new treaty global treaty on climate change, and this treaty should be negotiated by 2015. But meanwhile, it was recognized by the Convention, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, as well as the Rio process, that the humankind should enter into era of green global economic growth, where you significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions and support both mitigation and adaptation. Because the concept of adaptation was neglected for several years, because the humankind was imagining that it will solve the problem of climate change by reducing the emissions. Obviously this is not happening, so nowadays we have to put more efforts into adapting to climate change, which anyway is happening. I like a statement very much of the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, in which he is saying that we have witnessed three economic transformations in the past. One of them was the Industrial Revolution, followed by the Technological Revolution, and nowadays we live in the era of globalization. However, we have to start this great change to do the transition to the green economics. If we imagine how long it took in the past to do all these previous transformations, the industrial, the technology revolutions, it took ages. And what I told you, that the window of opportunities nowadays is between 100 and 150 days. So to act urgently is crucial. And if in the past the things happen more naturally through the private sector, development of economy, so bottom up, so nowadays the role of the governments, the role of the leaders is much more higher, because this green revolution should be triggered top down. Unfortunately, at the international level, the things are not happening with the needed pace. So the actions should be taken at the country level and at the local level. If we want to survive, we have to act even before international agreements come into force. And many countries, without waiting for the outcomes of the international meeting, are embedding in their national legislation measures to reduce emissions and to, of course, do the transformation to green economies. One example of such country or countries is the EU. EU has the ambition to become the leading climate-friendly region in the world. So since 2004, if even not before, EU started to put a lot of legislation which relates to climate change. There are more than 50 directives, regulations, decisions, communications related to climate change, which are already in place. I have listed here only 10 because there is no room on the slide, but you can find EU acquis on the internet easily. Not only that, but any directives which is drafted, the first guiding principles is look at how it relates to the climate change. So the new pledge of EU for the post-2012 regime, they decided and agreed that they will have independent target of 20% below 1990 levels by 2020, and if other countries they take relatively similar targets, EU will move up to 30% reduction. And this 20% already is in the legislation of EU. In many cases, some of the regulations are more ambitious even than the Kyoto Protocol rules. Currently, EU is developing and looking for an adoption of a roadmap for moving to comprehensive low-carbon economy in 2050. Where EU is saying that it will reduce its emission by 80 to 95% by 2050. So you see, EU is aiming to zero carbon emissions. So there are estimations that this is feasible. There are cost-effective pathways, and there is a pathway how gradually EU will reduce emissions. However, it will affect differently different sectors. If you look at the graph, different sectors, they reduce gradually emissions, but in a different speed. But if you look to the power sector, it goes to zero emissions by 2050. So imagine what a transformation should be done just less than 40 years, so that the energy sector do not produce any GHG emissions. So, because our center is covering developing countries as well, so the first thing when they say, okay, but it is expensive exercise. We don't mind to reduce emissions, but it's really expensive, so how we shall do it? And you know that already not only developed, but as well developing countries, they have to reduce emissions, because otherwise we shall not reach this target of 2 degrees Celsius. So there was some speculation and estimations, and of course it depends when the actions will be taken. As I said, if early actions are taken, it will be much cheaper. But let's suppose that climate protection costs 2.5% of the world output for many years. So we can say that this is not expensive compared to the potential cost of inaction. If we don't do anything, that will cost us much more because of the extreme weather events, because of the changing climate, because of all these big changes which climate change will force us to do. And the thing is that if we don't do anything, that will be much more expensive. So imagine the US economy, which grows in average with about 2.5% per year. If we skip 1 year of a growth of USA and then we resume again, then we shall have this 2.5% less every year after that. 1 year we stopped the growth. And the household income would double in 29 years instead of 28 years. So it doesn't seem that it's kind of a much disturbance to the development. If we imagine China, where the annual growth is 10%, and we just keep 3 months of growth, and then we resume again, the household income will double in 86 months instead of 83. Okay, so as I said, we need a big technological breakthrough to do this carbon neutral economy. However, we don't know when this will happen and how this will happen. So meanwhile, we have to do a lot of policies, a lot of measures, a lot of projects, a lot of actions, and there is no silver bullet, so we have to do a mix of policy instruments. All the economists, they advise that it is good to put a price on the carbon and to be applied as wide as possible, starting with removal of fossil fuel subsidies. And one of the best ways how to put a price on the carbon is through different emission trading schemes. A good example for such is the EU emission trading scheme. There are other emission trading schemes happening in the world, and there are many countries planning to introduce emission trading schemes in their countries. And EU is seeing links between all these different emission trading schemes in the world. Another thing is, I spoke already about the technology. It is to speed up the emergence and deployment of low carbon technologies. Of course, you have to put a lot of investments in research and development related to climate change, and this is an expensive exercise. But just to show you, this scheme below shows how the prices for the photovoltaics technology dropped since 2006. So for the first time in Spain this year, they started to build a photovoltaic farm which does not require any financial support, any subsidies. So you see how quickly this technology is developing, and how important it is that certain money are devoted to research and development. Another big measure is to avoid deforestation and to manage better the land. You know about big projects in the rainforest because they are the big sequesters of CO2 to stop the process of the deforestation and to turn it back to reforestation. Reducing demand of emission-intensive goods and services. Again, there are many different measures which you can introduce here to do that, including labeling, including information dissemination, including behavior change. Introducing of so-called 3R principle, which is reduce, reuse, recycle. Many NGOs are involved in this. This is, I think, their favorable area affecting, and increases and reallocation of financial resources. Many people say that, okay, in this financial crisis there are not enough financial resources to allocate to mitigate emissions. However, just to tell you that the International Energy Agency estimated that $7 trillion will be trapped into energy-intensive energy by 2040. So imagine what a big amount of money will go to energy from fossil fuels. So we just have to reallocate the resources into the right direction. Another area to me, which is very much important, this is international cooperation, exchange of experiences, exchange of different measures countries are applying, and I think that in the previous presentations this was visible. However, something which usually was left behind are the social policies, because we are talking about the shift of the economies, shift of the ways how we live, how we produce, and so on. But all this means that people, the labor market has to be transformed as well. People have to be re-educated. People have to be moved from one place to another. So, or if you remove fossil fuels subsidies, you have to think about vulnerable population and so on. So all these social dimensions and dimensions of the labor market should not be left behind, and this includes education as well. Okay, so what we are doing and what we think we should start up doing is to help the governments to start developing low-emission development strategies. And I was recently in Croatia helping the government to start developing low-emission development strategy. So they came out with the motto, "Let's do it," which is an abbreviation of low-emission development strategy. So you can meet as well low carbon development strategies or green growth strategies. In many cases this is the same meaning. So of course for developing and developed countries they are a little bit different, because developed countries, they have to go to zero emission plans and they have to meet their international targets under legally binding targets, which they have and will have under UNFCCC. While for the developing countries, these strategies should be more in the context of the sustainable development strategies, which will include, of course, reduction of emissions. And this, in the implementation, including development of such strategies, of course, is supported with international financial, technological, and capacity building support. Even before it was agreed that countries will do low-emission development strategies, many governments started, because they realized the advantages of having in place such strategy, because it's not only about climate, it's about economy, it's about development, it's about increasing competitiveness of the economy, it's about creating new jobs. It's about reducing other environmental pressure. It's about energy security in many of the cases, and different countries, they've seen different advantages. So even before the international agreement, they started to develop such strategies. There is a very popular abbreviation, NAMA. These are nationally appropriate mitigation actions which developing countries will do under such strategies. And there are more than 90 countries already undertaking such NAMAs, of which 51 are developing, and of which 25 are low-income countries. When I started to deal with these low-emission development strategies, there was almost no information on the internet, but nowadays if you Google low-emission development or low-carbon development or green growth, they pop up thousands of articles, thousands of guidelines, thousands of materials. I'm not going to talk about the green growth under Rio, because it was mentioned before, but it is the same concept of combining social equity, economic growth, and environmental protection in one. So UNDP, as I said, is supporting the countries to do these low-emission development strategies, and we are producing different papers, we are creating different projects. I'm running myself a project which supports the Eastern European countries and the Commonwealth, the independent states, to do this transition, starting with such low-emission development strategies, and we produced a guidebook which to help them how to do that. And one of the most important things, besides all technical stuff, to calculate emissions, to do baselines, to do cost-benefit analysis, to do economic projections, to do emission projections, we are helping them to govern the process, how to coordinate. Because many of the governments, they think that climate change is only an environmental issue, so the Ministry of Environment is in charge, and in many of the cases the Ministry of Environment is the weakest ministry in the government. And the first thing is for them to understand that the low-emission development strategy should become the development strategy of the country, and the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Planning, the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Energy should take the lead. So different mechanisms, interministerial mechanisms should be established, which should be lifted either under the Prime Minister or under the President, so to be at the highest possible level and to have the best possible coordination, as well as to involve different NGOs, to involve academia, to involve public, to involve different organizations, associations of the private sector. I agreed very much with the question which was raised before, that the governments are taking the lead, however they somehow do not consult and not coordinate very well with the private sector. I have to tell you that different under UN conventions, the private sector usually is given 2 minutes of a statement. That's definitely not enough, because at the end of the day the private sector is the one which has to implement all these measures and to come with deployment of environmental friendly technologies. So obviously their voice should become stronger. So we are trying to incorporate the private sector into this. Here is a link, so you can find all these publications online. One thing which I believe strongly is the personal lead and the role of the leaders. The best low-emission development or green growth strategy to me up to date is the one of South Korea. And you will be surprised, because in that strategy they talk about creating a new civilization. And that's true, because you have to change the behavior of the people. First you have to change the thinking of the people. And I strongly believe that it is your generation to have this new thinking and to make this big transition and to make this big change. 60 years ago, South Korea put a goal in front of itself to have economic growth. You see the first strategy, which has all these chimneys, all these factories, and now they realize that they need green growth. So the president is leading this, and they said that in the next 60 years, South Korea will be the leader in the green growth. And I strongly encourage you to have a look at their strategy. Depending where I am, I put different pictures of leaders living on this, who are showing with their policies, their lifestyle, their enthusiasm. My favorite usually is with Arnold Schwarzenegger or Angela Merkel, but here I put the mayor of, because we talk a lot about local governance, I put Boris Johnson, the mayor of London. And this is his initiative on bicycles in London, which really works. And as always the history shows, the great leaders inspire actions. I hope amongst you there is one or many of these leaders which will inspire action, so we can save our planet. I thank you.
There are questions. Oh.
So let's start with the first row.
Thank you. Since we are many, I will be short. I have two questions. First question, how we and how people in general and governments and everybody involved should translate guidelines and strategies in more concrete actions in shorter timeline, because nowadays there are hundreds of guidelines, strategies and whatever, but when it comes to implementation it takes too long, and until they are implemented actually everything is changing. And another question is regarding emission trading schemes. Maybe I'm wrong, but in my perspective it's not really much encouraging to reduce emissions, CO2 emissions, since developing countries, they always overuse their limit and then they buy from developing countries. I understand that it's income for developing countries, and developed countries can keep on using and contaminating our planet. Because at the end of the day, it's one world and one planet, as you were said, you know, and we don't have 4 planets. And I mean, that's cues from my maybe too much personal perspective. They are not really too much aiming. So that's it.
Okay, next row, let's go one by one.
Short question. You said that South Korea has the best strategy so far, and that every country should go to this kind of strategies. I was wondering, because one of the main debates that kept coming up in this class in the previous courses too is it fair to ask this from poorer countries when they didn't go through the industrial phase? So I was wondering if you know of any country that designed and implemented a good strategy which is working while having had skipped the industrial driven economic growth.
Okay, next row. Just go one by one.
We were talking about the ambitions of the European Union, and it is said that the EU's aim is also norm setting. And what do you think that is the EU successful in it? Kind of involving more countries and making them to follow their ambitions.
Okay, you.
Yeah, just a very short question. In one of the slides you said that if we assume that protection cost is 2.5%, I just wonder where this figure or this assumption comes from.
Okay. You say that amongst all the factors with the Bill Gates equation, let me say the only one we can work on is the CO2 per energy ratio. I must say that I quite do not agree, because there is also an act also on the energy service ratio, which means improving efficiency, and this is something we should be doing, and which are not doing. And then we should also work on service for people, because we are wasting services. We are producing a lot of waste, and we are using cars too much, and this is also on services. So there is a lot of action more than just reducing the CO2 emission per unit of energy that we can take. And then the other point is that you see the international cooperation on climate is not going so well. That's true. And then you see that the only way out of this is country action. I quite do not agree also on this, because this is about competitive advantages. Let me give you quite a clear example. China is making solar panels, but they are not using it. They are going for coal, they're going for oil, they're going for gas, because it is much more efficient and effective to produce energy by that kind of resources. So if you do not find a way to, let me say, mitigate the shock and competitive advantages, China will keep on going for oil, they will keep on going for coal, they will keep on going for gas. And believe me, they are not doing this in a very sustainable way. So these are my 2 points.
You go one by one until we finish the circle.
Okay, I would love to know whether the UNDP or any other UN organization is thinking about the coping strategies for the households or communities or countries that will have to be resettled. Because if you resettle a fishing community and you take them to the mountain, how will they cope? Will you change their lifestyle? Will you change their source of income? Because in my group, we're writing a paper on transforming human capital development. I'd like to hear your views. Because if you move people out of the environment where they are comfortable, what will you do to them? Are you going to take care of them all through their life? Then for the second issue about the settlement, is the UNDP thinking about the issue of disease control? There are certain diseases that have strains, unique strains in a unique environment. If you take them along to another area, I think it will be easier to move diseases around the world. And can we be able to cope with that kind of epidemic? For example, after the earthquake in Haiti, the UN intervention forces or the thing, I don't know which particular name they had for it, but there were issues of cholera in Haiti, which was introduced by Nepalese UN officials. Then about the issue of how do we localize each of these issues? Because you're talking about dealing effectively with the local governments, for them to, each local government having its own proposal on strategy on how to deal with low carbon emission. But usually what we see in Africa is a UNDP dealing more with the national government more than the state or local government. Or is it a different criteria for Europe and Central Asia and a different criteria for Africa?
I'm afraid if we get more questions, then we will have no time for another presenter. So I would suggest that we listen to the answers.
Okay, they were quite diverse. Okay, let me start with different emission trading schemes. Because they are quite different, and when you talk about the fact that developed countries are buying emissions from developing countries, you refer to the so-called clean development mechanism, which is project-based. It is not emission trading scheme by itself. It came from the presumption that it doesn't matter in which part of the world you reduce emissions, it affects the whole globe, because it's a global problem. And of course, in some parts of the world, it's cheaper to be done. And that's why, in order not to have exactly this leakage of emissions, there is the principle of additionality. So the project should be additional to what otherwise will happen in that country. And there are different UN bodies which are producing different methodologies, reportings, verifications, and so on. So it's not just trading. So the environmental principle is respected. When you have emission trading scheme, you put a cap on a sector or on all the country, in which you cannot go above. So the companies are trading below that target. So again, it's not trading, it's keeping them suppressed under a ceiling. So there is a lot of merit, because then the private sector is organizing itself the best way how it works for it. Either they will invest in new technologies, or they will reduce their production, or they will buy emissions. And EU all the time is trying to improve the EU emission trading scheme. There was a pilot phase, first, second, third. So all the time the rules are kind of improved in order to be more efficient in terms of emission reductions. Still, there are many issues about leakages, and many issues if only the developed countries take actions and others don't. You know that a year ago China overtook United States in terms of annual total emissions. So, and China is one of the main producers now in the world. So imagine one developed country which is producing nothing, zero emissions, however importing everything from China. So the consumption is the same. So there are many issues which are not sorted out at the international level. EU, for the first time in this roadmap I was talking about, is talking already about leakages, about measures which other countries should take. If not, you will introduce different import tax for goods which contain a lot of CO2. So these things are thought of. For the poor countries doing low emission development strategies, I said that there are many advantages to do that. I'm not going to list them, but as well it is decided already, and the developed countries pledged a lot of money. A green climate fund is established in which there will be $100 billion per year devoted to both mitigation, adaptation, supporting countries to develop low emission development strategies, and more importantly, to implement nationally appropriate mitigation actions. So that these strategies are not only on paper, but certain actions are taken. And on top of that, for the first time, there will be much more stringent system of measurement, reporting, and verification of the emission reductions for both domestically implemented actions and internationally supported actions. So I think these things are kind of trying to be taken care of. EU is very successful in its own climate change policy, and it is taking the lead at international level. Of course, it is not easy because in the world, in the convention, there are 196 countries and EU are 28 only. But if you, as I said, if you show the lead, if you show the example, if you show how you can help the others, and if you, as I said, the EU can lift up its goal if others join. So I suppose you play some quite significant role at the international level. The 2.5% growth is just an example to show you the ratio between the efforts which are needed to be done. As I said, there are different estimations. The 2.5 is actually quite high. Their estimation between 0.5 and 1% that it will cost if actions are taken now. About the households and local level and all this, I think my colleague Henrietta will talk more about how all these measures are converted to local level. I just want to say that UN doesn't have a kind of unified approach. UNDP is trying very much to answer the needs of the countries and to adjust its support towards the national circumstances. We work at all levels, on national, regional and local level. We have many examples of projects and even the previous presentation showing that there are many projects on local level, and especially in Africa, a lot of attention is paid to households and local communities. I'm sure I couldn't answer extensively all the questions, but to save time I'll stop and you can approach me later.
And now I think the floor to Henrietta from the UNDP.
So I hope you see me behind the screen, behind the computer. I usually prefer to stand, but now I have to click, so I'm trying to probably sit. So I also would like to thank the organizers, my colleagues, that they invite me and provide me with the opportunity to present actually part of my, I would say, everyday work. And it is my second time that I am here. I think that I presented here a few years ago on strategic environmental assessment, which is very related to this topic. So as you can see, I'm going to talk about basically what could be the approach, or what are the approaches to integrate link between poverty, environment, economic and socio-economic development into policy making, by which we mean into the planning at national, sub-national level, into the implementation of the plan, into the monitoring and evaluation, and into the budgeting. I will basically only touch upon the budgeting. I will go a slide lower. Actually, I hope you are not that hungry that you can still pay attention. I am actually quite hungry, so if I faint during the presentation, just give me a piece of chocolate or bread and I can continue. So I didn't actually introduce myself. My name is Henrietta Markoniakova and I work as my colleague.
Distributed bios of all the lecturers, so we know all details, including
but I wanted to say what is related to that slide and to the whole presentation, that I mainly work on implementation of the global UNDP and UNEP Poverty Environment Initiative. As you can see, it is a joint initiative between two UN organizations, which with the main objective to provide the partner countries both financial and technical assistance in identifying what are the links between poverty and environment, but more importantly, how to reflect those links in the in the planning and budgeting, for example, reflecting them in poverty reduction strategies or district plans or different sectoral strategies and so on. The initiative is being implemented in four regions, in our region, in Africa, in Asia Pacific, and in Latin America and Caribbean. Vice versa. Here I will not stop on that very long because fortunately, as Daniela has mentioned, the world is changing, and now there is a growing population who actually understands and know what are the links between how can environment degradation influence the economic development, social development, and poverty reduction, and vice versa. How can economic development make environmental situation even worse, and then we come to this vicious circle. So I will not, I don't think there is a need to stop here. We know that there are links. But could you, for example, try to come with an example, with very specific example of poverty environment issue? What is, for example, the sector, or what could be the issue that shows or illustrates the links between poverty, environment, or socio-economic development and growth, and environment, natural resources?
Fishing.
Fishing, okay. Agriculture, yes?
For example, when in Africa people don't have enough sources for food or water, that is a link between poverty and environment.
Yes, okay.
Agriculture. Exploitation of natural resources like trees, forests to gain income. If they don't have money, people might just go into the forest, exploit it without putting in more plants or
Yes.
so.
Yeah, and then it leads to the erosion of the
Yes.
soil and lower agricultural production, for example, and then we have a circle, yeah? Yes, so I like to use my slide. Actually, I am not the graphic designer, so the slide is not excellent, but I like to show those links in case of Kyrgyzstan. So as you can see, there is, as you have mentioned, there is a very strong link between land degradation, agriculture, and then at the end of the chain, food security and income, because as you see from the numbers, it is a very important sector in the country. Is there anybody from Kyrgyzstan? Yeah, so if I'm not correct, please correct me. It provides big percentage of the employment, but at the same time, as you can see, over 40% of the agricultural land is, including pastures, which are very important, is degraded, and 85% is exposed to the erosion. So then we can see how it can affect and how it affects agricultural production, income, and so on. In terms of natural disasters, also, more than 90% of the country territory is exposed to many natural events and processes, and there are huge damages in terms of cost and also lives in the country. The same comes to water scarcity, which water in the country is extremely important for energy, because most of the energy comes from hydropower and for irrigation. So, as you can see on the right, all those issues, environmental issues, are expected to be very seriously influenced by the climate change, which can even worsen, make the situation worse. Yes, so basically in this project we are trying to influence how the national and subnational sectoral plans are being designed through the process of mainstreaming. So we can start with environmental mainstreaming, because this is kind of more used term. In simple terms, it is basically the process of integrating environmental issues and objectives into non-environmental sectors. This is a very simplified definition. There are hundreds of definitions. Yeah. What we are trying to do within the poverty environment initiatives, we, as I say, we identify those poverty environment links and sectors, and then try to integrate those issues into, as I have said, planning, budgeting, implementation. I will actually talk
A second part of my presentation will be application of this approach in Tajikistan, and there we work mainly at the local level, at the district level with local government. So this will be just illustration that we work with local governments. And I would like to stress that that integration of those links into the policy making, it's not an easy task. That's why it has to be kind of assumed when we design the projects and when we set the objectives of our project, not to be too ambitious. If we have, for example, only 2 years project, because effective mainstreaming is really multi-year and multi-stakeholder effort, and it is very much related to the governance, as my colleagues have presented, which is not the most sexy topic, and it's very difficult to also present the results in terms of government, but it is a very important aspect because plans are being done by institutions, and institutional structures are designed by people. So as Daniela had mentioned, this is all based on people's behavior, which takes time to change. Why it is important to integrate those issues already at the planning level and policy level, because exactly at the level of PRSP or socioeconomic development plan, which are the documents designing the long-term or mid-term priorities for the country's development, those decisions and priorities there can really already have a big impact on environment. And also because we know from our countries that environmental ministries or agencies have usually lower status, and also not only because of that, but cannot ensure that all other sectors and ministries will integrate those issues alone. So we cannot hold those environmental ministries responsible for all of that process. This slide I have included only based on our discussion and reading one article with Daniela yesterday in the train, because sometimes we have questions when we talk about poverty, whether it's relevant for the region of Europe and CIS, since comparing to Asia and Africa, since our region mainly has middle income countries. So from that OECD report and from this sentence, we see that this is really an important issue in the region, especially also now in relation to the economic crisis. This is the mainstreaming process that we are trying to implement within the Poverty Environment Initiative. Actually, it is also being described in a handbook on poverty environment mainstreaming, which is there on the table. There are 2 publications that you can take. This is not invention of the initiative, but we are trying to follow this approach when working with partner countries. This is an ideal approach, yeah? Nothing is ideal in practice. So once you start the mainstreaming process, you have to at first try to find entry point, which is the proper strategic document in the country you want to reflect those issues. It has to be really the key document which drives the country's development and which actually gets the budget allocated. That's very important. And also, if you want to convince decision makers that there are links between poverty and environment, that they have to be reflected in the plans and budgets, you have to make the case. In PEI, making the case, we usually try to come with some kind of economic analysis studies, which I will refer to it later, where you actually provide evidence in economic terms. What are the links between poverty, environment, economic development? Then the very difficult but the most important process is doing the mainstreaming itself. So it's assigned the roles and the responsibilities of the different ministries and agencies, designing the process of the mainstreaming, which has to copy the planning process, identifying the people involved, methodologies, and so on. And then, of course, the extremely and the most challenging part
And the less successful part, I would say, is implementation, because you can have a beautifully designed strategy at the local or national level, but for example, if there is no budget allocated for environment or climate change issues that you have identified, you don't achieve a lot. And also very important is to set the right set of indicators. So at the end of the cycle, you are able to say whether your measures really contributed to both poverty reduction, but also improvement in environmental sustainability, in better use of natural resources, and so on. And also in the implementation part, there belongs the budgeting, allocation of state and private budgets to such measures, which is also an extremely, and so far the least successful part of the mainstreaming process. To stop very shortly on each stage, yes, in the how is usually mainstreaming done, or who is usually leading the mainstreaming process? Nowadays, they are in the countries. We can see three, I would say, options. It can be either environment ministry or agency, which in many cases, unfortunately, is not leading to success, because, as I have mentioned, unfortunately, those ministries in many countries still don't have a very strong position compared to other ministries. In some countries, the government sets up the interministerial committees. One very quite successful example is Bhutan, where this initiative works with the National Commission on Gross Happiness, which is it's an interministerial body which is actually responsible for the planning, and they use the guidance, and they require from each ministry to actually present how they, before they approve the sectoral plans, how they incorporate those issues. And also, there can be an option where ministry responsible for planning will take the role of the mainstreaming, which it's still not the case in many countries. So, considering this, within this initiative, unlike before, where environmental projects mainly partnered with ministries of environment, we are trying to have the key partners, the planning ministries, either the Ministry of Economy or Finance or some sectoral ministries, basically the ministries which are responsible and have a strong say in the planning and budget allocations. As I have said, we are trying to convince decision makers by bringing some evidence, so that that degraded environment can actually imply unnecessary cost to governments, or if the natural resources are not used sustainably, that countries are losing some kind of opportunities in terms of different economic factors. So we are trying to basically do the studies which show that how investing into environment, how it can influence, for example, the GDP or costs related to the GDP. When we, for example, talk about natural disasters, how those investments can generate revenues, reduce unnecessary expenditures, contribute to reduction of the poverty and meeting the MDGs. Here are some examples of the results of such studies. I'm not going to read them. I believe you will have this presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, so again, it shows in terms of numbers how environmental investment, again, can affect GDP, employment, tax revenues, and so on. Now we come to the process of mainstreaming itself. As I have said, your mainstreaming process has to start at the very beginning of the elaboration of the plan. For example, still unfortunately, when we work with local or national working groups who are responsible for designing the PRSP or district development plan. Usually we wait for the draft to be elaborated, and then those responsible for environment or public environment mainstreaming, which is usually a separate group, they receive the draft, and they are just asked to provide comments. But since lots of energy and money was put and time into elaborating the draft, and lots of kind of priorities of other sectors are put into that, the chance of changing anything at that stage is quite lower. So that's why those groups responsible for mainstreaming have to be part of the planning process, and those issues that show those linkages has to be integrated and reflected in each part of the plan, starting from situation analysis down to the implementation measures, indicators, and budgets. Of course, what I am saying is ideal, yeah? That's how it should be, but we are human beings, we have certain interests, so it's not always like this. Here I will just stop. This work in terms of budgeting, we will only start, and also I am not expert, I am not an economist, but this is, so I cannot present any experience yet, but this is an extremely important part of the mainstreaming, because as I have said, you can have a perfect plan and strategy where you actually list and even do a cost analysis. You put the cost of the measures that will improve the use of natural resources and lower the environmental degradation and at the same time increase the income. But at the end of the day, there is no budget allocated to those measures. Then it will stay on the paper. So, as I said, this is one of the most important parts in the mainstreaming cycle, but also I would say we are at the very beginning of that, because it is very difficult to, I think, globally nowadays to influence the way the governments are allocating, the systems the governments use for allocating the budgets to environmental and climate change investments. I think I don't know if you follow the Rio, but now there is a kind of light at the end of the tunnel, because there is a recognition that looking only at country's GDP as a kind of assessing how people are, and the well-being is not enough, and we have to go beyond GDP, because you know that there are countries that have high GDP, but because of not equal distribution of resources, there are still many poor people. I will now jump to show how what I have explained, how we applied it in Tajikistan and what results we have achieved. So we worked we supported 14 districts in one of the regions in Tajikistan. Is there anybody from Tajikistan? Yeah. Yes. So we worked in Suk region. Okay. Okay. We actually we were lucky because we entered the process of that was led by the Ministry of Economy and Trade, which had the objectives to improve, institutionalize the planning and budgeting at the local level. And the ministry decided to test it in 14 districts. So we basically entered that process, and that's also very important aspect of mainstreaming. You have to really influence, as I have mentioned, the processes that are led by the key actors in the country, and that there is a budget related to those processes. As I have said, it was led by the Ministry of Economy and Trade. As a kind of baseline, which we started with, there were already before district development plans, and also on a lower level, but when we reviewed them, there was no reference to environment, only to natural disasters, but not to environment at all. But also what was very, very important, and we were very happy to find out, it was also a kind of very important baseline situation aspect, that there was a strong interest and commitment of the local government representatives to change this situation. As I have said, we also tried to produce the report which would actually show and in agriculture sector, because that's what most of the people in the country identified as one of the most important sectors in terms of linking between poverty, income generation, and environment and climate change. So we made a study that estimates the economic cost of agricultural land degradation in Tajikistan in terms of GDP. And also in terms of cost per household. I'm not going to talk about the methodology because it was not me who elaborated the methodology. We had an expert on that. But we have some first data to show to the government. So basically to say, if you don't use your soil and land sustainably, you will have that much loss in your GDP. What results we have achieved? As I have said, the results in terms of planning and governance, they don't sound very sexy, and they are not, often when they are presented, they are not considered to be as a great result because we talk again about governance, change of thinking, but I consider those results quite successful. As I have said, the process of planning or improving the planning was led by the Ministry of Economy itself. And they were developing the methodology for planning planning in the future, which is supposed to be used nationwide. And for the first time, such methodology now includes the annex, which provides the guidance how to integrate environment poverty links into the plans. As I have said, we influence 14 district development plans. Those issues have been really integrated also in other sectoral sections. What I also find very good, as we have said, the proper strategy needs to have a monitoring and evaluation system, so indicators and targets. We worked with the State Statistics Office and included so-called poverty environment indicators in the official district database. And those indicators are now supposed to be used for evaluating of implementation of the district development plans. So basically, we managed to get those indicators in the officially used database. Of course, now more work needs to be done in setting actually the monitoring and evaluation system. Who will measure how often? That's also a very challenging task, but it is a very good first step. What I think is also successful. This project was funded by, had lots of quite a big budget from DFID, who in each district established a so-called district development fund for helping to fund some of the measures that were implemented measures that were included into the district development plans. And originally this fund elaborated a template, the criteria that the project proposal needed to comply with in order to get funds. And originally it was the criteria on economy, related to economy, financial feasibility, and contribution to social situation improvement. We, within the project, included the environment and climate sustainability criteria, and it has been accepted. Yes, we also helped to design the projects that would both contribute to income generation and improving the environment situation and efficient use of natural resources. We are working with the Civil Servants Training Institute, which is under the president, which has its own curricula on local development planning, where we also included the module on how to integrate environment into that planning. Again, we are at the beginning, we have to see to what extent this module will be applied, so we will see to what extent our results are sustainable. I have to also highlight that this planning process in those 14 districts was very participative. Around 900 people were involved either directly in the planning or through public participation and consultation, and around 30% of those people were women. We are also trying to trace involvement of this gender aspect. As I have said, we succeeded to work with State Statistics Institute to integrate some poverty environment indicators. When I'm saying poverty environment indicators, it doesn't mean that we necessarily came with the new indicators. It just sometimes it's enough to have a look and to analyze how certain indicators can provide better picture on what measure or project contributes to both poverty reduction and environmental sustainability, not only one aspect. You can basically see how we worked. The black indicator is the indicator that was originally in the database. The red one is the one that we suggested, and the green one was that was finally accepted in the database. You can go to those indicators later yourself. Implementation level. There were around 90 projects elaborated to be included in those district development programs to be funded by the district trust fund that I have mentioned. We did environment and climate sustainability screening of all of those projects, and 65 projects were approved. Our initiative also funded some of those projects because we wanted to demonstrate on the ground that there are the links between those two issues. One of the examples is to build energy efficient greenhouse for women self-help groups. Those are actually the groups of wives of migrant workers, and we are supporting the building of greenhouses that will be owned by households, and they will provide jobs for 30 women, and also because of using the solar energy will reduce wood and coal use. So we see the benefits both in terms of income generation and environment and climate situation. We are also working with the micro-loans foundation, but we are at the very beginning. We providing them with the training actually how to again also include environment and climate sustainability criteria into the scheme of allocating the loans. So as I have said, we have some examples. I think we have some successes. Of course, nothing is ideal, and we have to see how sustainable those results are, to what extent they will be replicated in other regions and in other countries. So I would basically end my presentation with, I wouldn't say in a pessimistic way, but we still need to be aware of what are the challenges for mainstreaming as such. Not only to cope with them, but also, as I have mentioned, to set realistic targets, yeah? Because there are some challenges that simply cannot be totally. So, as we all know, it's many times lack of political will. There are competing ministries and agencies' agendas, and therefore also lack of cooperation. Then there is still in some countries the thinking that it's the environment ministry who should do all the work, and at the same time they have not very strong position in the country. As I have mentioned, you can have great strategies, but then implementation is lagging behind. We more and more hear about kind of mainstreaming overload. We have to mainstream gender, climate change, environment, human rights-based approach, and if we don't provide clear guidance to the governments how to do it, it can discourage to actually go for that. Then there is a lack of data, for example, baseline data and screening capacity, and also fragmentation of environmental responsibilities between different sectors. Like, for example, in terms of water quality or water management, we can have two different ministries that deal with that, and then that can cause the problem. Yes, thank you. You can find all the information and publications, and also I wanted to originally show the video, 5-minute video from Tajikistan. You can also find the video on this website, which is the website of the Global UN Public Environment Initiative. You can find information related to global aspect, but also for each region and for each country separately. Thank you very much. If you have any questions.
Thank you. We are again distressed with questions, but let's devote some 10-15 minutes of the lunch break for questions and comments.
Okay.
Please. First comment.
I have comments about the mainstreaming process.
Okay.
There's a slide that indicates the stakeholders of the mainstreaming process, where you have the Ministry of Environment, inter-ministerial committees, and so on and so forth. But what I have not heard much is the role of the community level players. Because if you talk about mainstreaming of any environmental or poverty issue, the community people have to be involved. Even in the discussions, they have to tell us what the problems are, and then what they want, what they expect, and so on and so forth. So I think that aspect needs to be maybe improved. Then the other comment I have in the mainstream process is I didn't hear anything about monitoring and evaluation. Because if you are talking about a plan where you have to improve upon policies, there should be something how the policy will be monitored and how it will be evaluated. Otherwise, you end up drawing the policy and then it stays there. How is it going to be implemented? How is it going to be monitored and even evaluated? These are critical things I think that we should.
Maybe 2 more questions,
Okay.
usually.
As part of my daily work, I write business plans. So I want to know if there are where I can get guidelines on writing green business plans that can be awarded green business loans.
Okay. The third one. Yes, please.
Like you gave the example of DFID and DFID charting up all the points while giving funds. If I'm not wrong, every international organization has a CAS country assistance strategy. So if the national governments are not do not take into consideration budgeting and allocation of money for environmental policies, can it not be enforced in the CAS that they have to do that or else they will not be given the aid or loan?
Okay, so I will respond again. I think I will start with monitoring and evaluation because I did mention it actually. I was talking about when I presented the example from Tajikistan, I mentioned that we actually worked with the statistics office on identifying the different set of indicators, and they were included and they became part of the monitoring and evaluation of those district development plans. So I agree, it's very important. And I also have mentioned that this was only the first step. They are in the database, but there is still no system of how to actually measure who should be responsible, who should collect how often. So this work is ongoing now, but I agree it's a very important stage. As it comes to involving the community, thank you for bringing this up because yes, the mainstreaming and planning process it's very broad, yeah, and this is I agree very important part. And I think it's also related to the first presentation about the governance, because somebody asked what is the criteria indicator of good governance. I would say that also to have a look to what extent this planning was participatory and to what extent the comments of the community were taken into account. That could be one of the aspects to say whether the governance aspect of planning was satisfactory. I would also say from the experience that involving the public is easier if you are elaborating the lower level plan, yeah, like for example when you work on with the district government, as I have said, in Tajikistan it was a highly participatory process because we are discussing the issues that are well known and very close to the people, and they have a feeling that they have maybe have a power to influence something. While when you are doing the national level planning, this is already the bigger challenge, how to involve people and how to actually to show them that that whatever they say will be taken into account, because they can be disappointed. Yeah, you can have a public hearing, collect ideas, and then nothing will be reflected. So yeah, it's important. Green business loans. We have started with this work, but yeah, I can send you what we have. And yes, whether international organizations can push, I think they should, but unfortunately, maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but international organizations are still not doing themselves very well to integrate poverty and environment and economic growth and social issues together. So just to show you the example exactly from Tajikistan, as I have said, we worked on those district development programs which were supported by DFID and GIZ. When we saw the original project document, there was no mention. There was mention we will take environment into account. There was one sentence, and there was no any output, no any activity. So even us, international organizations, should do more to provide this more integrated support. Because how we can expect countries to commit to do so if we are not demonstrating and pushing for that ourselves?
Okay, thank you. Another round of comments, questions, or we go for lunch? Lunch.